Where lies the final harbor, where we unmoor no more? What rapt ether sails the world, of which the weariest will never weary? Where is the foundling's father hidden? Our souls are like those orphans whose unwedded mothers die in bearing them. The secret of our paternity lies in their grave, and we must dare to learn it. Okay, so congratulations if you recognize that quote and the author, but most of you probably didn't. So another quote from the same author in the same book, something might be more familiar. There she blows. Okay, that's right, that's from Moby Dick. The author is Herman Melville. Okay, and I'm here at 3 Clinton Square in downtown Albany. And this was the childhood home of Herman Melville. As you can see, I'm right next to McGeary's Pub, which is a quite well-known, popular spot here in Albany. And back across the street over there is the Palace Theater. Okay, so just to give you guys a heads up, idea where I am. Okay, so Herman Melville, he was born in New York City in 1819. In fact, we just passed what would have been his 200th birthday. He was born on August 1st, 1819. Okay, and he moved up to Albany in the 1830s when he was a child. His father's family was a fairly prominent family from Boston, and he was a major in the Revolutionary War. And actually, his mother was from the Gansevoort family, which is a very prominent family from the Albany area. Okay, Gansevoort in Saratoga County is named after this family. And his grandfather from that side was actually a general in the Revolutionary War. So he came from a fairly prominent family, well-known, well-established, successful. His father had an import business down in New York City, traveled all over the world. But when Herman was around 10 years old, his business ran into some problems. He decided to move the family up here to Albany, get a fresh start. Sadly, Herman's father died only about 2 years after they came to Albany. So that, again, first the business was failing and then the father died. So that really, the family really took a hit with that. So they're fairly successful and, not so much after that. So actually they had it, when they first moved to Albany, they had a nicer house over on Broadway. Then they had to move into here. This was a smaller quarters. Okay, and they lived here, this would have been about in the 1830s when he lived here for several years, okay, as a child. Okay, and they moved around a little bit. They ended up going to Troy later. So now when he lived here, we're very close to the Hudson River here, so one can imagine that he would go down to the river, see all the ships and whatnot, and all the action on the docks, plus hearing the stories of his father who traveled all over the world. This probably sparked his interest in the sea and traveling by ship. Okay, so he was actually a teacher, and he did a bunch of odd jobs, when he got a little bit older. And it wasn't until about 1839 when he went on his first sea voyage. He got a job as a deckhand going on a merchant ship from New York to Liverpool, England. And then it was after that when he joined whaling ships. Whale hunting was a big thing back then. They hunted the whales for the oil to burn in lanterns and whatnot. So he signed up for a crew in a whaling ship, and he did several voyages of that. And that's where he got the inspiration for Moby Dick. So he did end up doing some extensive traveling to the Caribbean, to Polynesia, which he wrote, several books. In total, he wrote probably close to 20 books in his lifetime. Moby Dick, though, which was written in 1851, was his most famous book, obviously. Like many authors, his books got mixed reviews while he was alive. It wasn't until after he passed away when, his books really got the attention that they deserved, and when Moby Dick became considered a classic of American literature. So he ended up moving to Pittsfield, Massachusetts, actually, and buying a house there, and where he ended up befriending several other authors, other well-known American authors at the time, who kind of congregated in the Berkshire Mountain area. Examples of that are Nathaniel Hawthorne and Oliver Wendell Holmes. Okay, and like them, Melville was very taken by the beauty of the Berkshire Mountain areas, and he decided to settle there. So he spent his time mostly in his later years between New York City and his house in Pittsfield. Okay, so Herman did pass away in 1891. He was about 72 years old. And as I said, he had a mixed legacy at the time. He had kind of fallen out of favor, and he was not that popular at the time, and he got many criticisms for his books. But it was only in later years when people would recognize him as a great American author. Okay, so while I'm here, actually right across the street here, this behind me is the Dutch Reformed Church, the First Church of Albany. So this is actually the oldest congregation in Albany and the second oldest in New York State. Okay, this congregation dates back to 1642. Okay, this is the Dutch Reformed Church. Now the building itself wasn't built, this building wasn't built until 1798, but the congregation started in 1642. It's had several different locations. This is the most recent one that's still standing. It's got a lot of history, and the windows you see there are made by the famous Tiffany company. And actually services in this church would have been in Dutch until about the 1780s, which is interesting. And absolutely Herman Melville and his mother would have attended services here. In fact, there's a section in one of his books where he talks about the pulpit. The preacher at the pulpit had an hourglass used to time his sermons so he wouldn't take too long. He got that from this church. I don't know if it's still there, but there was an hourglass in this church for that very same reason, and that's where he got the idea. And also, this church has one of the oldest pulpits in America, which is the original pulpit from 1650, imported from Holland. Okay, so this is a very old church, old congregation, very historical here, and that's it. Let's just check it out a little bit.